So the industry can't seem to get enough of these AI PCs. But what does ASUS's new Zenbook S14 do differently? Well, straight away, it comes in at just 1.2 kilograms, which is lighter than the SwiftGo at 1.32 kilograms, and thickness is around 1.1 centimeters or less than half an inch. And one thing that I really like is the one finger opening mechanism, which is something that you don't see on much laptops. However, unlike the SwiftGo 14, it doesn't open fully flat, which in my eyes isn't really a problem anyway. Now the build quality is really good thanks to that ceramic aluminium design, and there's pretty much no lid flex at all, but the lid area does have these nice metal strokes on the top with this nice textured finish, and of course the ASUS Zenbook text up here. And opening the lid reveals a very minimal deck with this nice pleasing vent area at the top, which allows the two fans to gather additional ventilation, and a very nice palm rest and wrist rest. The underside of the laptop is also very minimal, with a nice vent strip for those fans once again, and you've also got premium feeling sturdy rubber feet, which grip on the ground pretty well. And overall, it's a very extremely well built and solid looking device. And of course, we'll get to the thermals a bit later. Now for the port selection, they're to be expected considering the ultra sleek design, but on the left side, you do get a HDMI 2.1 port, two Thunderbolt 4 ports, a headphone microphone combo jack, and flipping over to the other side, you only get a single Type A 3.2 Gen 2 port. Now, I would have liked for them to include at least a micro SD card slot, but it's pretty good considering the overall slim design here. The keyboard and trackpad are also about what you would expect from a laptop this size and thickness, with the keyboard being nice and soft with sort of flat chiclet keys, and I didn't really have any complaints when it comes to spacing or travel. Let's see how fast we can type here. As you can see, I got around 100 words per minute, which is pretty good. The touchpad is also pretty decent. As you can see, it tracks pretty well, and if you slide your finger on the right side of the trackpad, you can see you can change the brightness, and on the left side you can change the volume, which is also a nice touch. I don't really have any complaints when it comes to the left and right click. It seems to be pretty good there too. And of course, since this is a Copilot Plus PC, it comes with a dedicated Copilot button, but also it comes with a dedicated key for the My ASUS app, which I liked as well. The trackpad spacing when it comes to the keyboard is pretty good as well. They've used most of the space here and it's quite enlarged, so you've got plenty of room for activities here. And of course, uses Windows Precision touchpad, which is what we've come to expect on many laptops these days anyway. And the screen is probably one of the best screens I've seen on a laptop so far. Not only is it OLED and comes with a 3K resolution, which is about 2888 by 1800, but it also has a 120Hz refresh rate. And this is going to be one of ASUS's Lunar OLED displays, which is ensured to cover 100% of the DCI P3 color range and 133% of sRGB, and roughly a delta E of less than 1. It also boasts a 0.2 millisecond response time, and brightness maxes out around 400 nits in SDR mode, but is also HDR 500 certified, meaning a peak brightness of 500 nits. I would say the screen is pretty good for video and photo editing, and in my opinion is a bit better than the SwiftGo 14 screen, being slightly less reflective. And it didn't seem to have that oily effect you seem to get with OLED screens, again like I saw on the SwiftGo 14. And the included webcam is 1080p, which is lower than the SwiftGo 14. And while it's not the greatest, it's not really the worst either. Colors are a bit washed out, but it gets the job done and would probably be fine for video conferencing or video calls. And of course, it takes advantage of the AI boost in the Core Ultra processor with automatic framing, eye contact, and background blur effects, which is again something we saw in the SwiftGo 14. And you can see those features in action with automatic framing, and also the eye contact, which is kind of creepy low-key, and then the background blur effects. But what the SwiftGo 14 didn't have is an IR blaster, which through Windows Hello you can set it up, and this just enables more accurate facial scanning. As you can see, the little red dot IR blaster activates there, and signing in and out of your laptop should be a lot quicker. And we can put that to the test by logging in here, and as you can see, it's really quick. And the microphones are going to be your standard array mics. They're not perfect, but it gets the job done, much like the camera, and you can hear it right now. And in my ASUS, you can also activate many of the AI noise cancelling features, like 360 recording mode, directional, or authentic, which just turns off all the AI stuff. And you can enable some of these more conference-focused recording modes, like single presenter or multi-presenter. And overall, the audio is pretty good, although there was a little more bass than I expected, which can blow out much of the mid-tones, but it didn't seem to affect vocals. And you can take a listen right now. You can see the bass starting to blow out much of the mid-tones, and once we increase the volume here, the bass just pretty much takes over, but it actually shakes the laptop a lot as well. You see the vocals are pretty loud and clear here, as you can hear. But in general, they're pretty good speakers, and I wouldn't really complain much, except for the bass. And there's a total of 4 speakers, and they're by Harman and Kardon, which is pretty good. And they do an excellent job here. There's also AI noise cancelling for the inbuilt speakers as well. And there doesn't seem to be a way to tune the audio either. There's no equalizer, which is kind of crazy because there's a total of 2 audio consoles, the Realtek audio console and then Circus Logic, which I can't really get behind. Now, despite being a Copilot Plus PC, it hasn't received the update to enable Copilot Plus or any of the other features such as Co-Creator or Windows Studio effects. And I'm not really sure why, since the update has been pushed out. But of course, you do get the standard cloud-based Copilot, which we've talked about earlier in the video. And in Paint, you also get the Image Creator, which is just a cloud-based co-creator. And through there, you can generate images, but I'm not really going to go into detail there. ASUS also has their own set of apps, including StoryCube, which is installed right now, which basically manages digital assets, but I don't really know how it works. There's also other apps such as Muse Tree, which converts sketches to images. And with Windows, you also get the adaptive dimming, which you can enable in settings. And once you enable this, when you look away from the computer, it should dim the screen and eventually lock the computer. But aside from that, there isn't really much in the way of AI. But much like on the Swift Go 14, you can download GIMP with OpenVINO plugins and start generating using the NPU. Now, before heading into the thermals and benchmarks, we'll take a look at the specs. And this model in particular comes with the Intel Core Ultra 7 258V, which is a pretty shit name if I'm being honest. And that comes with a total of 8 cores with only 8 threads, and that's because, as you know, they removed hyperthreading. So that's 4 Lion Cove cores and 4 Skymont cores. And really the main comparison that we'll have today is the Intel Core Ultra 7 155H, which is really the predecessor to this CPU in the ASUS Swift Go 14. And that has a higher core count and also hyperthreading, so it'll be pretty interesting to see how that performs. And as for the GPU, it comes with Intel's brand new integrated GPU, the Intel Arc 140V, and that uses their new Xe2 architecture. And RAM, it comes with 32GB of memory on package RAM, and we've got a 512GB Samsung SSD with this model number, whatever that is. And networking, we've got Intel Wi-Fi 7, which is really good, so none of that MediaTek shit. And the battery is 72 watt hours, which is pretty decent, especially for a size like this. And the overall price is around $1,800 or $1,768 USD. So overall peak power consumption on the Zenbook or the 258V showed a 25% less power draw than the Swift Go or 155H, which really shows that Intel has improved efficiency here. And power consumption overall was much more stable, averaging only around 29 watts, compared to the sporadic power draw on the Swift Go, averaging 47 watts. But the clocks and thermals are a different story. The P cores on the 258V averaged 3.3 GHz, peaking only around 4.3 GHz. And the E cores on the other hand, well, those averaged 3.7 GHz, which is higher than the P cores, and stayed there pretty much all the time. And the CPU package reached a max of 96 degrees, averaging 87, which again is pretty decent given the size of this laptop. But the P core clock speeds are pretty disappointing, being lower than the E cores. I really don't understand why Intel even includes P cores at this point, but I digress. Now as for gaming and Cyberpunk, the CPU averaged 28 watts, while the GPU averaged on around 15 watts. So overall the CPU and iGPU power managed very well. And during that same run, our P cores averaged 2.2 GHz with a max of 2.7 GHz, while the E cores on the other hand still averaged higher at 2.6 GHz and a max of 3.2 GHz. And our overall CPU package temperature only peaked at around 78 degrees, but averaged around 77. And as for our GPU temp and clock, the GPU maintained 1950 MHz, with temperatures in the range of 78 degrees as well. So overall, our temperatures maintain themselves pretty well, especially during Cyberpunk. That dual fan vapor chamber and added ventilation seems to manage itself well despite the extremely thin design. However, P-cores consistently had lower clocks than that of the E-cores, pretty much defeating the purpose of even having a hybrid architecture. But that seems to be more of an Intel problem and not really an ASUS problem here. Now, battery life is a definite strong suit of this laptop. The 72 watt-hour battery goes hand in hand with the new Lunar Lake processor to produce some of the best battery life figures I've ever seen. Some of the most impressive battery life came from the modern Office being 100% higher compared to the Swift Go 14 with its 155H. And 88% higher in application use, while almost lasting 24 hours while idle. Now for benchmarks. In UL Procyon Office, we saw a 40% increase in Word, a 6% decrease in Excel, and a 4% increase in PowerPoint versus the Swift Go 14. In Adobe with PureBench, we saw a 1% loss in Premiere, a 6% increase in After Effects, and a 36% uplift in Photoshop. The higher core count seems to do the 155H favors in Premiere Pro, although single threading and per core performance favors the 258V in After Effects and Photoshop. Now Blender Classroom saw a loss of 41% and BMW saw a loss of 33%. So per core performance couldn't really save the 258V here. Even the much older SwiftX 2021 with the Ryzen 5700U beat the 258V. Now in Chromium Code Compile, it took 6.2 hours to complete, but we couldn't really compare it to anything else due to the depot size changing for Chromium. In Cinebench R23 Multicore, we saw 25% less compared to the 155H, and in single threading, we saw a 20% uplift. This reinforces the 258V's superior per core performance, but the impact of its lesser cores. In 3D Mark Time Spy, we saw 16% higher performance and 83% higher in wildlife compared to the Swift Go 14. It even came quite close to the Cyborg 15 with its RTX 4050 and beat out the Z13 with its 3050 Ti by 10% in wildlife, but loses by the Z13 by 3% in Time Spy. It's pretty impressive performance with the Arc 140V GPU in the 258V. Intel's improvements with Xe2 are on full display here. It even beats out the older GTX 1650 laptop. Now for the 3D Mark storage benchmark, the Zenbook had a 36% faster SSD compared to the Swift Go 14, which means the SSD in this laptop is going to be pretty fast. So we've just got one more question, and that's, can you game on this laptop? We're going to start things off in Cyberpunk at native resolution at the low preset with XCSS set to ultra performance to start us off, and let's see how it performs. For whatever reason, our overlay seems to be stuffed up, but we can see the CPU metrics there, and we're getting around 34 FPS on average with pretty stable 1.1% lows. Obviously, this isn't a laptop that you're going to be gaming on every single day, but it's just interesting to see how this new Xe2 graphics performs. We averaged around 36 FPS, which is not bad actually for a game like this. So now we've headed into a bit more of a reasonable title this time, again at native, with all low settings, with no upscaling, because upscaling sucks in CS2. We'll head into a deathmatch. And already the fans are starting to get real loud. But they aren't like loud, they're more of a whiny sort of hissy noise. So overall performance is, well, not that good for a game like this. We're getting around 60 FPS on average. We're getting nowhere near that 120 Hz refresh rate, but I mean, it's still playable. It's definitely playable. Of course, our 1.1% lows are all over the place, but that's to be expected in a game like this. And of course, I just die every 2 seconds. Our CPU temps seem to be faring well as well, but our clocks seem to be pretty lower than expected. I'm not sure why. Now that we're settled in, we're getting above 60 FPS on average, around 63, and our 1% lows are settled in around 43. Next up, we're going to try Shadow of the Tomb Raider. We'll run this again at native resolution, turn off anti-aliasing, and we'll set things to we'll set it to around the medium preset here. On second thought, given that we're getting like 40 FPS in the menu, let's drop that down to low, still a native resolution, full screen VSync. Alright, let's see how it performs. So jumping in, we're seeing around 60 FPS on average, which is not too shabby. 1 and 0.1% lows are not far off either, but that does seem to be dropping as we're heading into this town here. And as you can see, we've dropped to around 35, 34 FPS and our averages have suffered quite a bit. We're most likely more CPU limited here anyway, due to all the NPCs. But it's holding up pretty well nonetheless. So we ended up with an average of 40 with 1% lows of around 31. So next up, we've hopped into Forza Horizon 5 and we're at native again with unlocked FPS. And we've set XeSS to performance. We've also set the low preset and we'll hop into a benchmark mode. So straight away, we're getting around 50 FPS on average with 1% lows around 40. CPU usage is quite high though, I'm not too sure why. But obviously for some reason I can't see GPU utilization, but anyway. The game actually looks pretty fantastic, especially on this screen. And it's fairly smooth, although we just got a bit of a lag spike. Obviously dropping the resolution is going to give you more performance, but I just wanted to see how it performed at native resolution in these games. And it seems to fare pretty well. So that little Archive GPU does a fairly good job here. So at the low preset with XeSS set to performance, we got around 50 FPS on average with 1% lows of 43. So not a bad experience at all. Again, not that you'll be gaming on this laptop or anything. And that just about does it for the ASUS Zenbook S14. Overall, I think it impresses with its ultra lightweight design, premium build quality, and of course that exceptional OLED display, making it a top choice for portability and productivity focused users. Battery life is a standout feature, delivering some of the best results in its class, while performance is balanced, excelling in single-threaded tasks like Photoshop, but of course falling behind in more multi-threaded and heavy workloads due to the decreased core count in the 258V. Its AI capabilities are functional but not groundbreaking, and its port selection might be slightly limited for creative professionals, but it's to be expected given how thin this laptop is. I'll drop a link in the video's description to purchase this laptop from Amazon, but anyways guys, that's all for today. Make sure to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. Also make sure to click this video on the screen right now.